Hello students, peace be upon all of you. As you can see in the title of the video, in this video we are going to cover how to find the circumference of the circle, or how to determine the circumference of a circle. Now, how does a circle look like? We have a circle. Here's how a circle looks like. Now, what is the definition of the word circumference? What is the definition of the word circumference? Well, in other shapes we've talked about how to find the distance around other shapes in other videos. So if you go to the video in which we talked about rectangles and squares, we defined the distance around the shape as being what? As being something called the perimeter. So we said the perimeter is the distance around any shape, any polygon, a shape that has what? 3 sides or above. So if you have a triangle, the distance around that triangle is called the perimeter. If you have a rectangle, the distance around that rectangle is called the perimeter. If you have a trapezoid, the distance around that trapezoid is called the perimeter. So it's the distance around the shape. It's the distance around what? Around the shape. Now, same idea was what? Same idea with circles. Same idea with circles, except that the perimeter of a circle, we call it circumference. Circumference is the same idea as the perimeter. It's the distance, but not around the shape, but not around a polygon, not around a rectangle or a square or a triangle or a trapezoid. It's around the circle. It's the perimeter of the circle. It's only used for circles. It's only used for circles, and so the circumference defines the perimeter of the circle. In other words, it defines the distance around the circle. All right. And now that means it defines what? If it defines the distance around the circle, it means it defines how big the circle is. So let's say you go to the store and you want to buy a trampoline, a bouncy trampoline. Now you go to the store and you want to get a big trampoline that holds so many people. Now, in order for you to get a big trampoline, then you need to get a bigger circumference. You need to get a trampoline with a big circumference, a huge circumference, right? But if you want to get a trampoline that holds one person only, then you want to get a small circumference. Does that make sense? So it defines what? It defines the size of the circle, okay? So the salesperson can come up to you and be like, oh, this is a 20-meter trampoline. A 20-meter trampoline means what? It's a huge trampoline. It holds what? It holds more than one person. But if you want to get like a 2-3 meter trampoline, then it holds about 1 to 2 persons, right? Now that we know what the circumference is, how do we find the circumference? So the circumference, what? It's the distance around the circle, defining how big the circle is. It determines the size of the circle. So if you go to buy any circular objects, they will usually use the word circumference, defining how big the object is, right? So the smaller your circumference, the smaller your circle. The bigger your circumference, the bigger your circle. So it's the distance around the circle. It's the distance around the circle. Now, how do we find the circumference? Circumference, C, equals to something called pi times the diameter. Now, mathematicians have defined pi as being what? As being the circumference divided by the diameter. Okay, and so it's a Greek symbol that stands for a number 3.14. It stands for a decimal number that is called 3.14. So 3.14 is called pi. It's what? It's the Greek letter that symbolizes that number right here. Okay. So pi is what? It's 3.14. Now the diameter, D stands for what? For diameter. What is the diameter? The diameter is the line that goes through the middle of the circle. Is the line that goes through, so this is the center of the circle, right? The center of the circle is the middle of the circle. So the line that goes through the center of the circle while ending on the edge of the circle, while both ends of the line ending on the edge of the circle, that's called what? The diameter. It can go this way, it can go this way, as long as it goes through what? As long as it goes through the middle of the circle and ends on the edge of the circle, we call it what? We call it the diameter. So if you have a line like this, is this the diameter? No, that's not the diameter. It's not going through the middle of the circle. It is ending at the edge of the circle, but it's not going through the middle of the circle, and so this is not the diameter. But this line right here is definitely going through the middle of the circle, and it's definitely what? It's definitely ending on the edge of the circle, and so we call it the diameter. Now, if we take this line, half of that line here, now we only have half of it. Now we said that the whole line is called the diameter. Half of that line we call it the radius. We call it the radius. So half of the line is what? Is the radius. The full line is what? Is the diameter. So the full line here is called the diameter. Diameter. Half of the diameter, only half of it, it's called what? The radius. Okay? Now that we know these attributes of the circle, let's go ahead and take this process into action. Now let's say we have a circle. Let's say we have a circle. We have a circle right here. And we want to determine what? We want to determine the circumference of the circle. Let's say the diameter is about 10 meters. 10 meters. So circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. Pi times the diameter. Now pi stands for 3.14 times the diameter. What's the diameter? It's going through the middle of the circle, so it's 10. So 10 meters. 3.14 times 10 meters. If you are allowed to use a calculator, you may use a calculator. If you're not allowed to use a calculator, then you need to practice how you multiply what? Multiply these numbers together, right? You need to practice how to do that. Now, we ignore the decimal, right? We ignore the decimal. So 0 times 4 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. So we've multiplied all these three numbers. Now we have to shift, right? If you haven't done this, you need to go back and practice it, okay? If you haven't done this before. Now 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 0, 4. We add them. Of course we have to add them. So 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. 0 plus 1 is 1. And then we'll put the 3 down. How many decimals here? There's only two numbers after there's only one decimal number. It's the 3.14, and there's two decimals after it. So we only have to shift we only have to shift 2 times. 1, 2, so the decimal goes here. So the answer is 31.4 meters. Okay? If you haven't practiced how to multiply a decimal by a whole number, you need to go back and practice that before you go ahead and do the circumference. If you're not allowed to use a calculator. If you're allowed to use a calculator, then you just take pi 3.14 times the diameter, which is the line going through the middle of the circle. Okay? Let's have another one last example. Let's say this time you don't have the diameter, you have the radius. The radius is 3 meters. Now what are you going to do? Well, we know the radius is half of the diameter, so if we draw the other half, we're going to get another 3 meters. So 3 plus 3, that's 6. So the diameter is what? The diameter is equal to 6 meters. And so circumference now is pi times the diameter. Pi is 3.14 times the 6 meters, which is the diameter. And then again you go through your multiplication. 3.14 times 6. Now let's go through the process. 6 times 4 is what? Is 24. 4 carries a 2. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 plus 2 is what? Is 8. 6 times 3 is what? Is 18. How many? There's only one decimal number, and there's two numbers after the decimal. So 1, 2. So the answer is 18.84 meters. Okay? Pi times the diameter. Pi is 3.14. The diameter is the line going through the middle of the circle. Alright, line going through the middle of the circle while the endpoints are on the edge of the circle. If you have the radius, then you add that radius you add that number by itself. So if the radius is 3 meters, then it's going to be 3 plus 3. If the radius is 10, then it's going to be 10 plus 10. But if you already have the diameter, you just take it and you multiply it by 3.14 to get what? To get your circumference. To get your C. C means circumference. In other words, it's the distance around the circle. If you haven't practiced how to multiply a decimal number by a whole number, I want you to make sure, I want you to go practice that and make sure you know how to do it. If your teacher allows you to use a calculator, then that's no problem. You can just use a calculator and get that answer right away. Alright? I hope you guys found this helpful. If anything was confusing, please go back to that part that was unclear or confusing, or replay the video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next video.